Hey, welcome to the channel. My name is Charles, and if you are struggling to lose weight because you've hit a plateau and you feel confused as to why you're not losing anymore, then this is the video for you. Everyone is going to experience some kind of plateau in their weight loss journey, because if they didn't, they would disappear into nothing and literally die. But it's super frustrating when you hit that plateau long before you're ready to give up and you still want to lose a little bit of weight, or maybe a lot of weight in some cases. So in this video, I'm going to share my story of how I broke a plateau and what a plateau is, how to know whether you've hit a genuine plateau, and to remove some of the confusion about it. I'm going to share the 3 main reasons that you are probably experiencing a plateau, and then I'm going to share what to do to start breaking that. And if you're currently experiencing a plateau, I would love to hear, put it in the comments, share how long you've been there. Let's get the conversation going. I'm sure there's a lot of people in this boat as well. So about 4 years ago, I started my weight loss journey, and I mean, I've had a ton of weight loss journeys. I've been trying to lose weight for probably a decade, but this is the time that it's actually stuck and that's actually been sustainable. So in 2018, I was at my heaviest weight ever, and you can see a picture of what I used to look like. It was about 3 months after I'd had my second daughter, and I just felt incredibly frustrated. I felt just like I was trapped in my body. And being a new mum, or being a new mum for the second time, a lot of people would tell me, you know, just embrace your new body, like embrace the fact that your body's changed through pregnancy. And I didn't want to do that, because I felt like motherhood had almost taken something from me, and that if I had to exist in this body that I wasn't comfortable in, that I didn't want to look in the mirror, that my joints were aching, and I couldn't do the things that I'd used to have been able to do, like that just felt like it had taken just so much from me. So I didn't want to accept that, and I was desperate to look for some kind of way that I could lose weight that hadn't been as restrictive as it had in the past. And I've talked about my story with this a lot of different places. If you want a real in-depth understanding of what my weight loss story is, then check out the description. You can listen to the podcast all about that. But essentially what happened was I found some videos from Chef AJ. I learned about calorie density, and I had this aha moment that I had a calorie issue, that even though the foods that I'd been trying to lose weight on were healthy or they were raw, they weren't really getting me into a calorie deficit, or they were too restrictive for me to stay in a calorie deficit and be consistent. I stumbled across someone called Janine Elder, who is otherwise known as Potato Wisdom, and I'm forever grateful for her, because I ended up buying her ebook, which is all about how to do the potato reset. And I did it. I did it for the first month. I was like, I'm going to go all in on this. I was skeptical, because coming from someone who's dieted so much in their life, I really thought that my metabolism was broken. What happened in that first month was I lost 8 pounds without going hungry, and I was freaking shocked. Like, I had never lost weight that quickly and that easily. So after that first month, I started to incorporate more whole foods. I was still using these principles of calorie density that I talk about in my other videos, and I kept losing weight. But what happened was, because I started introducing more food, and because I'd also become a smaller person, that I needed less calories, over that period, my weight loss started to slow. Don't worry, we're going to get into exactly why this happens in a second. So that first month, I lost about 8 pounds, and then it slowed to about 4 pounds a month for approximately 3 to 4 months. And then it slowed right back down to about 2 pounds a month for about 6 months, and then way down again to about 1 pound a month, until I plateaued at a very similar weight to where I am now. So I ended up at about 135 pounds, which is a BMI of 20.5, which is really healthy for me. It was a really, really good point to be at, but I wanted to be a little bit leaner, and I hit this plateau and I wasn't able to break it. So I was feeling awesome about my body at that time. I was feeling like I had a new lease on life. I was super energetic, tons of energy to play with my kids. I felt like I was me again, but more me than I'd ever been. I had so much more confidence, and I just had changed so much over that year and a half. And it wasn't like it just got to that year and a half and I was a changed person. I started to see myself change, not only in my body, but in my confidence and how I saw myself, like literally a month in. Like it was worlds apart. So I really wanted to break that plateau, because I like the idea of having some ab definition. I wanted to be a little bit leaner, but I was still really happy with where I was. It wasn't an emotional kind of decision. It was like, yeah, I want to break this. I want to get a bit leaner. I want to see if I can, have those visible abs, but it wasn't really happening with the changes that I'd made. And I'll explain why. So I was definitely not unhappy with my body, but I wanted to get a little bit leaner. And with all of these habits that I'd set up, eating tons more vegetables, using calorie density, I knew why I wasn't losing weight, which I will talk about in a second, like I said, but I wasn't really able to shift my habits and my lifestyle so that I kept losing. Like I tried a couple of things, I wasn't losing any more weight, and then something changed. So at that point, I started working at a cafe as a chef, and I went from being able to snack anytime that I wanted, fridge on tap, food on tap, to having a very, very set breakfast and lunch, because I would eat breakfast at the cafe because I would arrive there about 6 a.m. and I would have a very predictable set lunch time that was normally really, really late. So, and then I would come home about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. I would go to the gym to try and get that in, and then I would have a bit of a snack and then have like a big dinner. And my weight started to drop again. I was getting visibly leaner, the weight was coming down on the scales, and it was pretty quick. I think it was about 2 pounds in the first couple of weeks. So kind of similar to what I had been towards the start of my weight loss journey. And that's when I had these photos taken, which is the last set of professional photos that I've ever had done. I still use them because I love them. I just have not gotten around to taking another lot. But as you can see, like I was pretty lean in these photos. It's really only a couple of pounds difference, or a couple of kilos difference to where I am now. I will talk about that at the end. We'll get there. But I was losing this weight quite quickly because of a very predictable reason. My calorie input lowered, and my calorie output, the amount of calories I was burning, had raised significantly. And the reason for this was I was now packing a breakfast and lunch to eat at the cafe. Instead of having food on tap, I could only eat the foods that I'd brought with me, and I was moving like all the time. I was on my feet all day, I was picking up plates, I was just walking all around. So I'd gone from, relatively sedentary to a very active job. And then a lot of time I would bike to work in the mornings, or I would skate to work, or I'd walk a bit of the way home. So my calorie output just went through the roof. And then I was eating my meals quickly, and I wasn't able to snack in that time. And I'd normally have lunch quite late, normally around 2 o'clock. And then so I'd be full for my lunch. I'd come home, go to the gym, and then come back, spend some time with my kids, have a bit of a snack, and then a big dinner. But my overall calories went down as well. And in those first couple of weeks, I was really busy. So sometimes I'd literally just be making overnight oats. I'd make like a huge batch of overnight oats, and I'd have that for breakfast and for lunch. And it was great that it was quick, but it wasn't very high calorie food. So by the time I would get home from almost like my full day of eating, or at least 2/3 of my meals, sometimes I'd only eaten like 800 to 1,000 calories in that time, and I'd been moving the entire time. So my overall calories had taken a hit. And then I found a bit of a medium with this. I stopped just taking my overnight oats, and I started taking like sweet potato and cooking that up in the oven while I worked, and my weight loss stalled again. So I dropped a couple of kilos again to, I'm actually going to say it probably is really similar to where I am now. I might have gotten this a little bit mixed up. Like honestly, it's hard to remember, but I was pretty lean at that point. I would say about 1 kilo leaner than I am now, so probably about 2 pounds leaner than I am now. And I stayed there for a while. And at that point, I was getting really serious about this idea of starting a YouTube channel and a podcast and starting to talk about weight loss. And it's kind of silly when I look back, and kind of funny, but I didn't feel like my body was ready. Like I didn't have washboard abs. I wasn't like a fitness kind of influencer. Like I'm a mom, I've still got like loose skin from having 2 babies, and I just didn't feel like my body was like credible enough to go online. So I thought, I want to get a little bit leaner. I want to just tone up a bit more. So I decided to hire a macro coach to help me do that. And partly with that as well, I wanted to learn about a different kind of way of losing weight. I felt like that was going to help me in educating people moving forward. I'm going to do a full video about this, possibly, if you want to hear about my experience with that macro coach. let me know in the comments and I'll make a full video about it. But basically, with working through with her for about 3 months, which was really hard and to me extremely restrictive, I was able to lose about 1 kilo more. I think that's all I ever lost, was probably like 1 kilo to possibly 1.5 kilos more. And I'm going to speculate that most of that was water weight anyway, and lack of glycogen, because I was eating less carbohydrates than I am now. Carbohydrates hold on to water, and I was eating more protein. Protein doesn't hold on to as much water, so I looked visibly leaner quickly, but as soon as I stopped doing that, like, my weight went up really quickly, and I don't think that was fat. Anyway, I will talk about that. Let me know if you want me to. So that's my story of how I have had various plateaus throughout my journey, and I'm going to do a full physique update really soon, because there's more to this story where I gained some weight back and then I've lost a little bit of weight since then. But overall, my weight is very stable, and I'm very happy to maintain where I am in probably like a 2 kilo kind of zone. And I'm happy to plateau here. But if you are plateauing and you're not happy where you are, let's talk about why that happens now and kind of unpack this story. I want to premise this by saying that a plateau is not an indication that you're doing anything wrong or that your body is broken. It simply means that you're no longer in a calorie deficit. To understand a plateau, you have to have a really basic understanding of why weight loss happens in the first place. Think about it this way. You have a certain amount of calories coming into your body, and you have a certain amount of calories coming out of your body. That is your calories in or your calories out, otherwise known as your energy balance. So when you are maintaining your weight, you've got a balance there where the calories coming in and the calories coming out are relatively stable. So your weight's neither going up or going down. That's weight maintenance. And when you hit a plateau, you're really just maintaining your weight. So weight maintenance, plateau, they're the same thing in terms of what's happening for calories. If your calories go up and you're eating more calories than what you're burning, those calories have to go somewhere. So they get stored as fat for a rainy day. It's your body's way of conserving the energy that's come in and then using it for when you need it. So that is what is going to result in a weight gain. In any time that you've gained weight in the past is because you've had some kind of calorie surplus, either because your movement's gone down or your calories have gone up, or a combination of both. So then to lose weight, you want to tip that scales again. Think of this a bit like a seesaw. You now want to be eating less calories than what you burn, so that your body is forced to pull that energy from your stored fat cells. It takes that stored energy from your fat cells and it uses that to power your basal metabolic rate, your movement, your blood pumping around your body, and that's where you start to actually lose fat. It's from a calorie deficit. So to break a plateau, you need to get into a calorie deficit again. But why does it stop in the first place? Why, when you've been in a calorie deficit at some point, does that start to slow and then stop? And there's 3 main reasons why this could be the case. Number 1 is the amount of calories that you need as you lose weight changes. And what was once a deficit is no longer a deficit for your new body weight. Think of it like this. You start off with some kind of calorie deficit where you reduce your calories, and now the amount of calories that you burn are more than the calories that you're consuming. Over time, as you start to lose weight, you no longer need as many calories. So the amount of calories that you're eating, it might stay the same, right? That could be 1,800 calories, for example. But now you go from needing, let's say, 2,000 calories a day to support what was your old body weight, to slowly lowering that because you're in a calorie deficit. And then at some point that meets where now your new body weight only needs about 1,800 calories to function. You're no longer in a calorie deficit. You're now at a calorie balance. You've reached your calorie maintenance and you plateau. This does not mean that you're broken or that dieting has messed up your metabolism or that your metabolism has slowed down. It just means that a smaller mass needs less energy than a bigger mass. Think of this in the same way you would a big truck. A big truck needs a lot of fuel to power it because there's a lot going on there. Versus a tiny car, we've got a little Honda Jazz, it's tiny. It doesn't need a lot of fuel because there's not much there. If you go from being a big unit to getting to be a small unit, it's a predictable response that the amount of calories you need to power yourself are going to be less as you've lost weight. And this is the most common reason that someone will hit a plateau. It's the reason that I hit a plateau at a much lower body weight, because I had a big calorie deficit to begin with, and then that got really almost to nothing at the end, and then it did get to nothing where I was maintaining my weight, and that's where I am now. The second reason is that you've plateaued because your calorie input and output has changed, but you haven't really realized it. And this is what tends to happen when people think, you know, I'm doing all the same kind of things and I haven't lost much weight and I've plateaued. Why is that the case? If you're eating less to get into a calorie deficit, there's a big possibility that you're also moving less because your body's compensating for that. You don't have as much fuel coming in, and your body goes, okay, I need to conserve some of that energy that is coming in, and you spontaneously move less throughout the day. You might be fidgeting less, you might be sitting down more, whatever it is, it could equate to hundreds of calories. So even if you've lowered your overall calories or you're exercising way more, you could still not be in a calorie deficit. I mentioned exercise, it's the same kind of thing there. Even if you have increased the amount of exercise that you're doing, which theoretically would get you into a calorie deficit because you're now burning more calories, you could be eating slightly more and not even realizing that you're doing that. It can creep up over time, and you might also be moving more throughout your day. So what feels like a calorie deficit actually isn't. And the third reason that you plateau is that you've got something else compensating for you not losing weight on the scales, but you actually are still losing fat. So you're not in a true plateau. As you're getting closer and closer to your weight loss goals, or if you're already quite lean and you're just trying to lose a little bit more, because you're not in as much of a calorie deficit as someone who's got a lot of weight to lose because they've got a much higher energy burn than you, or than you did when you were bigger, then it's going to be harder over a day-to-day or even a week-to-week period to see if you're actually losing fat. You might be maintaining your weight for a couple of weeks and then have some things that are causing the scales to go up, like holding on to water weight. If you are eating more salt, or if you've got more carbohydrates, you might just be eating more food in general, but less calories, which can often happen when people switch their diet to a low calorie dense diet, like what I did. What happens is it looks like the weight is staying exactly the same on the scales, but you actually are losing fat. So there could be things there for a couple of weeks or even longer that compensate and your weight stays the same, but you are actually slowly losing fat at those later stages. So that's the third reason why you could seem like you're in a plateau, but you're not actually in a plateau. Just as a side note, this is a really common reason that people that come to a high carbohydrate, low calorie dense, high volume kind of diet, which is the kind of diet that I eat now, who have come from a low carb diet, tend to see weight gain. It's not fat gain. It's because you're eating more food, you've got more water in your system from holding on to glycogen, which when you've got glycogen in your system from carbohydrates, you do hold on to more water. It's all of these other things, just more in general inside, that is making the scales go up. It's not because you're gaining fat from eating potatoes. Okay, so just as a side note, there's so many things that affect your overall weight. What you're wanting here is fat loss. It doesn't matter if the scales goes up initially or if it stays up for a little while, if your fat is still going down. Eventually, you're going to see that translate on the scales as well. So now that you understand these three things, you can see that what happened when I started to lose weight again is that I easily got into a calorie deficit because my entire system and lifestyle changed. I started eating less calories and I started moving more. So from what was weight maintenance, I got into a calorie deficit and I was able to break that plateau. So when it comes to breaking a plateau, you are going to have to get into a calorie deficit again. But the first thing to make sure of is that you are in a genuine plateau. So if you're in those later stages or you've just changed your diet, give yourself 3 to 4 weeks to assess that you are actually in a plateau of being consistent, all right? Because over that time, you're going to see that downward trend if you are losing fat, or you're not going to see anything, or you might even see a gain if you're in a calorie surplus. But give it a bit of time to actually know that you're in a plateau. Once you figured out, okay, I really am in a fat loss plateau, because you've given it enough time to figure that out, then there are 3 main things you can do to start getting into a calorie deficit again. I'm not going to go super deep into these, but if you want an in-depth video about really how to break it, Once you know that you are, then let me know in the comments and I can make that. Number one is to get really clear as to where your biggest calorie expenses are. This doesn't mean that you have to count calories, but it means that you get really clear about where your big spenders are. And you do that by understanding that some foods have got a much higher calorie cost than others. You want to fix your biggest leaks first. Think of this like you've got a budget and you want to reduce the amount of money that you're spending each week, and you're going out and you're buying Gucci handbags every week. You don't have to track every expense. You just have to say, okay, you know what, I'm not going to buy those Gucci handbags anymore, and you're going to save yourself hundreds of dollars a week, maybe thousands of dollars. I don't actually know how much a Gucci handbag is. It's the same kind of thing with your calories. There's no point scrimping and saving on your meals and trying to eat less in your day-to-day if you've got these huge calorie expenses, which are weekend binges or eating out every night, or you've got like your donuts up there in there, anything that can add thousands and thousands of calories to your week. Those are the things that you want to attack first to lower your overall calories. Secondly, you want to focus on those big, easy changes that you can make rather than the little nitty-gritty ones. So once you've figured out, okay, those are my big calorie expenses, then you go, okay, I'm going to focus on those first and I'm not going to change everything else. Because if you go and you tweak the amount of starch on your plate, or you start trying to reduce the amount of oats that you're having in your porridge, and that causes you to have a binge, then you've basically thrown the baby out with the bathwater, where you've made it actually harder for yourself to get into a calorie deficit because you've made it harder for yourself to stay consistent. Make the easy changes like stopping drinking alcohol, which could add hundreds of calories to your week, stopping cooking with oil, or stopping eating tons of processed foods, or going out to eat. Make those changes your highest priority. Do them first because they don't affect your day-to-day hunger. Anything that affects your day-to-day hunger is going to make it harder for you to stick to something that gets you consistent and consistently into a calorie deficit. If you take one thing away from this video, then remember that. Number three is if your consistency is great. If you are eating whole foods, plant-based most of the time, you've got a very high level of consistency, you're not binging, you're not inconsistent with your weekends, you eat at home all the time. If everything is quote unquote perfect and you've plateaued, then that is the time, then and only then is the time to start tweaking the calories on your meals slightly more, or walking more, moving more, to get that balance changing again so that you are eating less calories than you burn. When it comes to tweaking your day-to-day meals, my advice after talking to hundreds of women is that most people should never be doing that until much, much later in their weight loss journey, when they've got consistency down. So focus on your consistency first. Get those big expenses under control. Then let's talk about tweaking your diet. I challenge you that your consistency is probably not as good as you think it is. So if you can increase that, you are most likely going to get into a deficit again and start seeing fat loss. And consistency is such a huge part of breaking a plateau and understanding how to do that in an effective way. And I wanted to share a couple of stories that have come out of the program that I run, Lean with Plants, of how women have been able to do this. First one comes from Nicole, and she said, 6 months ago, I joined Lean with Plants and lost around 6 pounds. I plateaued / maintained September, November, December. I joined a pod, and the identity challenge really got me going again on the weight loss. I'm now at the lowest weight I've been since 2017 and still going strong. The biggest change is my mindset. When I go off plan, it's for one meal, not for months. When life goes to crap, I don't reward myself with mindless binging. I'm so grateful that I don't have to think about food when I have stressful things going on. I just eat the healthy food already prepared in my house. I can't wait to see where I am on my year anniversary in Lean with Plants. This one is from Daniela. She said, I broke my plateau. Finally, consistency is where it's at. Just like Chelsea keeps saying, don't give up. Don't give up. So happy right now. This one is from Beth. She says, today I broke the barrier and got below 125, and I've officially dropped 20 pounds since joining Lean with Plants. 44 pounds total since I started my weight loss journey. Whoop whoop. I couldn't be more grateful for this and all I've learned and continue to learn in Lean with Plants. So to wrap it up, a genuine plateau is because you're no longer in a calorie deficit, which most often happens because as you lose weight, you become a smaller person, or something in your lifestyle has changed where you're no longer in a calorie deficit and you're not really realizing that that's the case. To break a plateau, you must get back into a calorie deficit, and the first thing to focus on is your consistency. Where are those big holes? I would love to see in the comments, let me know, where are those big holes in your calorie expenses? Is it weekend eating? Is it eating out with your partner? Is it binging? Let me know, let's talk about it. Don't forget to also just give yourself a bit of time, give yourself a bit of grace. You might not be in a plateau, you might just have some things offsetting that. So be patient and look for that downward trend over time, not those day-to-day fluctuations. Above all, focus on your consistency, focus on building habits that get you into that overall calorie deficit. 99% of the time, if you get your consistency down, while understanding these really key weight loss principles like a calorie deficit, you will be able to break that plateau and get to the weight that you want to be. That's it from me. I hope you enjoyed this video. I've done a super deep dive into why you plateau, how to break it, all about that, and what to do when you're doing everything right and not seeing results in some podcast episodes that I've did. So go and check those out. And I'm also very, very keen to do a more in-depth guide to tweaking and breaking the plateau. So if you want to see that, then let me know. And if you don't even know where to get started with your weight loss, then check out the Lean Your Meals workshop. It is how to create weight loss meals that you love. You'll find that in the description as well. See you next week. Bye.